The scene shifts to a B-rank hunter who is worried about the dungeon break that is expected to occur in a few days. He bumps into another person and becomes angry at him. The other hunters watch them arguing, and one of the hunters notices the huge man and remarks that this person could even defeat Dongwook, an S-rank hunter. He guesses that they both might be hunters since only hunters are present in that place. The other hunters start worrying about the B-rank hunter as he seems to be losing control while confronting someone clearly more powerful than him. The B-rank hunter demands an apology for bumping into him and declares that he is an upper-tier B-rank hunter. Seeing the other hunter remain silent makes him even angrier. To everyone's shock, Rakan suddenly eats the B-rank hunter. Rakan smiles at the hunters and destroys the entire location with a single punch, sending the hunters flying. One of the hunters crashes into a building and Rakan throws a car at him, taking his life. Rakan calls the hunters lowly humans and announces that he will hunt every single one of them by ripping apart their skin and flesh with his teeth and nails. He declares himself the king of beasts and roars, shaking the entire area. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Cha Hein, who drinks some lake water. Jinwoo mentions that there is a hotel nearby where they can wash up and have breakfast and asks if she is interested. Cha Hein agrees, and Jinwoo summons Kaisel. Cha Hein wonders why Jinwoo summoned Kaisel since the place is nearby. Jinwoo explains that it would take only 5 minutes if he ran at full speed. Cha Hein is surprised and wonders how many miles Jinwoo can cover in 5 minutes. Both of them start flying toward the hotel. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Chairman Wu, who is shocked after hearing that there is an intruder at the front of the association building. He asks if there are any casualties. A member explains that the exact number cannot be confirmed at the moment. Chairman Wu remains in shock as there are still a few more days before the dungeon break and wonders where the huge magic beast came from. He asks for Jinwoo's location, but the member explains that they cannot get hold of Jinwoo. Chairman Wu decides to handle the situation himself. Suddenly, another member arrives and informs him that a hunter has stepped forward to fight the magic beast. Chairman Wu questions if it is Sung Jinwoo, but the member clarifies that it is not Sung Jinwoo, though the hunter is a world-class hunter. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Rakan with an overwhelming aura surrounding him. Lennart from Germany arrives to confront Rakan. Lennart worries that he might not be able to defeat the magic beast and thinks this might be the end for him. He reflects that it might be his fate to be in Seoul at this moment to face the magic beast. Suddenly, Thomas appears and grabs Lennart by the head and pushes him aside, stating that Lennart is in his way. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Jinwoo and Cha Hein, who are having breakfast. Jinwoo suddenly receives a call from Chairman Wu, and Chairman questions why they have been unable to reach him. Jinwoo explains that he was outside of phone service until now. Chairman Wu informs him that a magic beast is rampaging in the middle of the city. Jinwoo finds this hard to believe as there are still a few more days before the dungeon break. Chairman Wu insists that the information is accurate and explains that exactly one magic beast has appeared. Jinwoo is surprised to hear that a single magic beast has wiped out an entire guild and realizes that it is not an ordinary magic beast. Chairman Wu adds that Thomas is currently facing the beast. Jinwoo cannot believe this information as his shadow has been tailing Thomas and should have reported anything unusual. He wonders why the shadow did not inform him even though an entire guild was wiped out. Jinwoo notices that his shadow's presence in Seoul feels very weak, as if there is interference. He tries to connect to his shadow, but the system notifies him that the designated shadow cannot be found. Jinwoo explains to Cha Hein that there is a problem in Korea. Cha Hein questions if the dungeon break has already happened, but Jinwoo clarifies that this is something else. Jinwoo asks Chairman Wu if the beast has a shadow, and Chairman Wu advises him to check it himself, as it might be too dangerous for others to investigate. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Rakan, who transforms into a more powerful being and begins walking slowly toward Thomas. All the hunters are stunned by Thomas showing up out of nowhere in Korea. Thomas instructs the other hunters to hurry and evacuate all the civilians. He glares at Rakan and decides to keep the magic beast in its place and defeat it without hesitation. Thomas uses his reinforcement skill to enhance his defenses. Both Rakan and Thomas glare at each other as mana waves from both of them clash, creating massive destruction. Rakan smirks at Thomas and attempts to attack him with his nails. However, thanks to Thomas's reinforcement, the nails fail to scratch him. Thomas delivers a powerful punch to Rakan's face, grabs his head, and smashes him into the ground. Meanwhile, Choi Jong-in arrives at the fight scene to assist with the evacuation. His guild member informs him that they are still evacuating people inside the building. Choi Jong-in inquires if any other guilds have been dispatched, and the guild member explains that both the Fiend and White Tiger guilds are on site and will try to control the magic beasts soon. Choi Jong-in begins sweating after hearing about the beast, and his guild member advises him to focus solely on the evacuation. Choi Jong-in is informed that Thomas is currently facing the mysterious magic beast. Suddenly, he senses Rakan's presence and remarks that it feels even worse than what he experienced during the Jeju Island raid. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the fight where Thomas delivers a punch that sends Rakan crashing into a building and completely destroys the building. Rakan retreats momentarily and then charges at Thomas with full force, landing a hit on his stomach. Thomas barely manages to hold his ground and grabs Rakan with both hands and smashes him down. In response, Rakan kicks Thomas in the face and starts smiling as he is clearly enjoying the fight. Thomas, deciding not to hold back, uses his reinforcement skill to enhance his defense. At the same time, the White Tiger Guild arrives at the fight scene. Baek Yoonho warns his guild members to be cautious, but suddenly a blast occurs right in front of him. Baek Yoonho is shocked by the strength of Rakan and watches as Rakan walks forward with a sinister smile. He starts sweating as he witnesses the intense battle between Thomas and Rakan. All the guild members collectively cheer for Thomas to kill Rakan, but Thomas angrily tells them to take cover. Baek Yoonho realizes that Rakan is not just a regular magic beast. Rakan looks down at Baek Yoonho, and Baek Yoonho starts sweating as he feels Rakan's immense strength. He cannot even make eye contact and feels like a small white tiger in front of an incredible wolf. Baek Yoonho tries his best not to be recognized as prey as his instincts warn him of the danger. Rakan then shifts his focus back to Thomas. Rakan uses a skill similar to Commander's authority and begins throwing vehicles at Thomas. Thomas swiftly evades them with a single hand. Rakan crashes more cars toward Thomas, but to his surprise, Thomas uses his capture skill to pull Rakan toward him and smashes him down. Thomas attempts to punch Rakan again, but suddenly feels uneasiness and senses that he might lose this fight. Despite this, he decides to attack once more. Rakan grabs Thomas's hand, and Thomas begins trembling nervously. Rakan expresses his surprise that a mere ruler's vessel can wield such massive strength and declares that he has had enough of Thomas's tricks. Rakan cracks open his manifestation and questions if Thomas is afraid of him, and then hits Thomas with multiple strikes. All the White Tiger Guild members are in disbelief as they watch Thomas struggle against Rakan. Suddenly, Rakan notices a shadow hiding within Thomas's shadow. He grabs the ant shadow and questions what it is doing there before squashing it. Rakan shifts his focus back to Thomas and cracks his spiritual body, suggesting that they make the fight purely about brute strength. He completely shatters his manifestation. However, Thomas unexpectedly grabs Rakan by the throat and squeezes it with full force, twisting and breaking it. Despite this, Rakan turns back toward Thomas and grabs his face and smashes him into the ground. Rakan remarks that he is starting to feel hungry, but suddenly notices someone attacking him from behind. Lennart attacks at Rakan with his charge skill, causing him to slide back, and declares that he will not let Rakan kill Thomas. Lennart begins shivering as he feels the overwhelming strength of Rakan. Thomas advises him to run away, knowing that Lennart has no chance of winning. Despite this, Lennart decides to fight, acknowledging that he is also a hunter. He reflects that he has no regrets, and that even in his final moments he would choose an honorable death over a cowardly survival. Lennart convinces himself that he would make the same choice 100 times over. As Rakan charges at him, Lennart starts saying to himself that he made the right decision. However, as Rakan gets closer, Lennart begins to regret not running and wonders if he made the wrong choice. Rakan prepares to devour Lennart, but suddenly Kaisel attacks Rakan. Rakan counters by scratching Kaisel with his sharp nails, destroying him. Rakan smirks, mocking the weakness of the shadows, but Jinwoo emerges through the shadow and kicks Rakan down to the ground. Jinwoo instructs Lennart to take Thomas to a safe place. Rakan realizes that what the Frost Monarch said is true, that a human is carrying the vessel of Ashbourne. Rakan transforms into a wolf using his spiritual body manifestation, and the rest of the hunters begin to leave the area. Jinwoo notices Rakan's intense thirst for blood and realizes that Rakan is not the only monarch present in the city. Rakan becomes confused about how Jinwoo is able to generate such supreme strength with a human body, and suspects that the architect might have something to do with it, as the Shadow Monarch must have made a deal with the architect. Suddenly, Horatia appears behind Jinwoo and wonders aloud if she can eat him, expressing her curiosity about how other monarchs might taste. The system identifies all three monarchs as enemies, and all four monarchs begin charging up. Jinwoo commands all his shadows to come forth. Igris and Iron immediately charge at the Frost Monarch, while both Tank and Jima attack Rakan. The rest of the shadows focus on Horatia. Rakan, seeing all the new shadows, wonders if this is the Shadow Monarch's new army. The Frost Monarch unleashes his breath attack, and Jinwoo blocks it using his daggers, but the rest of his shadows are frozen. The Frost Monarch confidently declares that the new Shadow Army is weak and incapable of moving even a single inch inside his ice prison. Queresha questions why the Frost Monarch froze her children as they were just about to have a reunion. The Frost Monarch becomes irritated, accusing Jinwoo of believing that he can destroy the monarchs with such weak shadows. He realizes that Jinwoo has not yet gained the full strength of the Shadow Monarch and warns him not to underestimate them as they are still monarchs. Jinwoo breaks free from the ice magic and looks directly at the Frost Monarch. Spinning his new dagger, Jinwoo confidently announces that he is going to take down the Frost Monarch. Frost Monarch summons his own ice army and calls Jinwoo a fool. Queresha decides to join the fight and commands the dead army using parasites. The dead army leaps at Jinwoo, but he slashes them apart with his dagger in a matter of seconds. Jinwoo realizes that Queresha is using corpses to create her army. Suddenly, an ice beast tries to crush Jinwoo, creating shockwaves, but Jinwoo dodges the attack and slices it apart with his dagger. All the other ice beasts attack Jinwoo at the same time, but he destroys all of them in a single second. Jinwoo suddenly senses danger and notices Rakan attempting to scratch him with his nails. Jinwoo barely dodges the attack, and both of them begin fighting. Rakan remarks that Jinwoo cannot harm him with just an iron stick, but to his shock, Jinwoo slashes his arm and Rakan screams in pain. Jinwoo explains that the dagger is not just an ordinary iron stick. Suddenly, Jinwoo notices a giant green hand coming toward him. The giant green hand tries to slam him down, but Jinwoo jumps away. Queresha summons 4 more giant green hands while Rakan heals his arm. Jinwoo begins to feel tired from facing all 3 monarchs. He takes a deep breath, and out of nowhere, Buru breaks out of the ice prison. Buru gets angry at Queresha for trying to harm his king and mockingly calls her an insect. Both Frost Monarch and Rakan are shocked that a shadow was able to break out of the ice prison. Rakan explains that the shadow is of commander level and that every commander level shadow is essentially a god of destruction. Queresha becomes disappointed that Beru does not recognize her own mother and decides to punish him. She uses her green hand to slam him down, but Beru easily slashes the green hand apart and returns to his king. Beru kneels before Jinwoo and begins crying, saying that his king is truly a great person. He praises Jinwoo for holding his ground against 3 monarchs and expresses amazement at his greatness. Suddenly, the dead army charges at them, but Beru switches to an angry mode and slashes all of them apart with his claws. Queresha attacks Beru from behind, while Jinwoo gets caught in the giant green hands and is slammed down. Frost Monarch does not give Jinwoo a moment to retreat and attacks him with a large number of ice weapons. Jinwoo deflects every single ice weapon with his daggers. Frost Monarch questions how long Jinwoo can defend against their coordinated attacks. Suddenly, Frost Monarch is stabbed in the chest with a dagger. Jinwoo declares that he will make sure Frost Monarch does not leave this fight alive. Frost Monarch becomes frustrated, but Jinwoo notices that even a stab to the heart is not fatal to him. Jinwoo attacks Frost Monarch multiple times, but Frost Monarch dodges every single attack and smiles at Jinwoo's futile attempts. Suddenly, Rakan attacks Jinwoo from behind with his weapon and slashes him on the back. Jinwoo screams in pain while Beru is in shock seeing his king injured. Queresha calmly states that she is the mother of all insects and that she will gladly embrace Beru as her child even though he does not recognize her. Queresha grabs Beru while Rakan confidently announces that this is the end for Jinwoo. Beru shouts to all the shadows to help Jinwoo. Greed breaks out of the ice prison and declares that he will be the one to kill all of his king's enemies. Frost Monarch praises Greed and guesses that he must have been a strong warrior before turning into a shadow. Frost Monarch notices all the high-ranking shadows breaking out of his spell. Despite this, Frost Monarch declares that Jinwoo's playtime is over as he already suffered a deep wound. Jinwoo smiles at them and uses his status recovery to completely heal his body, and this completely shocks the monarchs. Meanwhile, the entire world watches the fight between Jinwoo and the monarchs. Lennart notices a mana storm raging at the battlefield, while healers do their best to heal Thomas. Thomas asks Lennart for an update on the fight, and Lennart explains that it feels like he is witnessing the end of the world. Baek Yoon-ho watches the fight from a distance and realizes that Jinwoo is no longer the same person he once knew. He wonders how Jinwoo has gained so much strength in such a short time, even though he has the ability to level up. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the fight. Tigris attacks Rakan, and Rakan blocks the attack, while both Greed and Tusk attack the Frost Monarch. Greed's attack is stopped by an ice barrier, and Frost Monarch counters Tusk's Hymn of Fire Dragon with ice magic. Beru escapes from Queresha's green hand by slicing it apart, which angers Queresha, and she charges at Beru. Jinwoo attacks Queresha from behind and recalls the architect's last words about a pillar of fire holding up the world that would kill him. Jinwoo explains that the architect never told him whether the pillar would fall or not. Jinwoo effortlessly slashes Queresha with his daggers. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Lim Taegyu, who is waiting on top of a building to take a shot at the monarchs. Lim Taegyu hesitates to interfere in the fight and decides to wait longer. It is revealed that the Fiend Guild's elite assassins were deployed 30 minutes ago in an effort to inflict a lethal wound on the monarchs. Lim Taegyu worries about how many of them will survive by the end of the fight and realizes that they will die whether their attacks succeed or fail. He reflects that not even Thomas could defeat the monarchs. Lim Taegyu finally decides to attack, but someone grabs him and advises him to just watch the fight. Lim Taegyu starts sweating and looks back to see who stopped him, but to his surprise, no one is there. Meanwhile, all the hunters who were deployed to defeat the monarchs end up watching the battle from a distance. They realize the battle will not last long and the end seems near. Kuresha regenerates her body completely and attacks Jinwoo with poison. The system notifies Jinwoo about the poison and successfully detoxifies it. Kuresha becomes frustrated that even her poison does not work on Jinwoo and warns him that she will rip him to shreds. Jinwoo freezes her using Commander's authority, and Kuresha feels an overwhelming power that she cannot break free from. Jinwoo activates his mutilation skill and slashes her into hundreds of pieces. Kuresha accepts her defeat and for the first time feels what death is like. She realizes that Jinwoo has the strength to send beings like the monarchs into darkness and fades into the world of nothingness. Jinwoo levels up by 3 levels after defeating the Monarch of Plagues. Frost Monarch is shocked that a mere human vessel was able to defeat Kuresha and begins to worry that the monarchs will experience the horror of facing the most powerful king. Rakan explains that Jinwoo is exhausted and that the fact he is depending on his shadows proves he is an incomplete monarch. Rakan declares that Jinwoo cannot stop a true monarch and tells the others not to fear him. Rakan attempts to kill Beru, and Jinwoo feels Beru's presence fading. Jinwoo remembers how Rakan killed the shadow assigned to Thomas in a similar way. Jinwoo decides to cancel the summon to save Beru, but the system notifies him that Beru cannot be recalled. Jinwoo dashes toward Rakan to save Beru, and Rakan jumps away. Jinwoo barely manages to stop Beru from being destroyed. Frost Monarch feels confident after hearing Rakan's words and realizes he has overestimated Jinwoo's powers. Frost Monarch transforms into his final form and brings out his trident. He announces that he will trap all of Jinwoo's shadows and make them resurrect repeatedly until Jinwoo runs out of mana. He declares that Jinwoo's shadows will become mere parasites feeding on his mana. Frost Monarch freezes all the shadows and attacks Jinwoo with his trident. Jinwoo tries to block the attack but gets scratched on his arm. Frost Monarch attacks again and smashes the entire ground. Frost Monarch believes Jinwoo is gone, but Jinwoo suddenly appears and attacks Frost Monarch with his daggers. Frost Monarch dodges the attacks and counters by hitting Jinwoo with his trident. Jinwoo slides back from the force of the attack and coughs blood. He realizes that Frost Monarch is incredibly fast. Frost Monarch notices that Jinwoo's incomplete spiritual body manifestation is consuming a large amount of mana and decides to finish him quickly. Frost Monarch dashes at Jinwoo, and Jinwoo blocks all his attacks. Jinwoo observes every movement of Frost Monarch and realizes that he just needs to outpace him to kill him. Frost Monarch notices that Jinwoo is scheming something and declares that it is useless. Frost Monarch brings out another trident. Jinwoo suddenly appears behind Frost Monarch and feels confident that he can finish him. However, to his surprise, Frost Monarch smirks at him. All the hunters watching the fight are shocked as Jinwoo is suddenly stabbed from behind. Rakan pierces Jinwoo with his claws, and Jinwoo begins coughing blood. Jinwoo, still refusing to give up, tries to break free from Rakan's claws. Frost Monarch stabs Jinwoo in the chest with an ice dagger and urges him to heal just like before. Frost Monarch realizes that Jinwoo cannot heal again as he is still an incomplete monarch. Frost Monarch explains that Jinwoo will not live to witness the day their army sets foot on his world. He declares that they will create mountains from human corpses and rivers from their blood. He further adds that he will treat South Korea differently by freezing every human in the country and making them suffer for eternity by keeping them alive forever. Frost Monarch urges Jinwoo to make his final attempt to save his world and mocks that his futile effort will bring him joy. Frost Monarch freezes Jinwoo completely. Jinwoo slowly closes his eyes, and the system notifies that his HP has dropped to 0 and that the player is dead.